Good. Excellent.
Are we okay? Good. Good evening. My name is Jochanan. I work for Etion. I work in the think tank of Etion. Etion is a network of about 4,500 business leaders, entrepreneurs in Flanders and Brussels. And I work as philosopher mainly on the ethical part of economics. And recently I published a book, still in Dutch. Will probably be translated, Robot aan het stuur, or you could translate it as When Robots Rule on the Ethics of Technology. Maybe I should say that when Professor Ekstrand, when he started his presentation, I thought, now I'm going to live my speaker's nightmare. So you have some nightmares like you forget your slides or the technology doesn't work. But another nightmare is someone else is telling your story. But you didn't. But at your first slide, I thought, oh my God, this is actually my story. The fact that technology is not neutral. But then you started to speak about recommendations, and I'm not going to speak about that. I'm going to speak about the interface between ethics and technology, and autonomous technology. And that this interface will become increasingly important when technology is more and more controlling itself. And there's in many of the new technologies like Internet of Things, smart devices, learning machines, self-learning machines, and smart robotics, there's not a lot of human interaction needed to operate these machines. So we are actually shifting from an era where we humans need to learn how to use technology, for instance, taking driving classes to drive a car, to an era where the machine is learning how to deal with people, like self-driving cars, taking driving classes, or an operator taking a training to operate a machine, and now cobots are actually learning how to work with people. And that makes a big difference in the relation between ethics and technology, and I think that we will need moral imagination, and participatory design is part of that, as you will see. So there are some similarities between what we've seen. Now I'm going to start with a famous car accident you probably already know about. Almost 1 year ago, the first deadly car accident with a semi-autonomous car of Tesla. So the owner of the car drove with autopilot, and the car drove into a truck, and the person in the car sadly died. Now, I don't want to speak about who was responsible. I want to start with the reaction of Elon Musk. Elon Musk, who I think is a very inspiring entrepreneur, and I don't doubt his moral assumptions, but he surprised me in his reaction because he was very irritated by the fact that this accident got so much media coverage. He wouldn't be glad that I'm talking about it again tonight, but because he said, look, every year more than 1 million people die in traffic due to bad human driving. If everybody would have a system like ours, we would at least halve the casualties. Now my point is that Elon Musk is probably right about his mathematics, and he said, yeah, that's important, that also explains the title of my presentation, just do the bloody math, he said. Now he's right about his mathematics, but I think for people to trust technology, there's more needed than mathematics. And here comes the relation with what the first speaker said. Technology is not just technology. We speak about an Internet of Things, but there's also something like an ethics of things. Many technological products are an extension of moral assumptions on what is good behavior and what is bad behavior. The speed radar, behind the speed radar, there is a moral assumption that you should drive safely and that you shouldn't speed in traffic. And this technology forces you to do so. These gateways, you find them here in the Brussels North, at the subway or in the airport. They're there for security reasons, but also, what is the idea behind these gateways? What is the behavior wanted? Sorry? You have to pay your ticket. You should pay for public transport. Again, this technology forces you to do so. Behind this, I don't know whether people have been in the Efteling, which is a theme park in Holland for children. And there's this speaking trash can. Hollebolle Gijs is his name. So he's saying something like paper here, and the children put their trash into the trash can. This is obviously the idea, the wished, the desired behavior is that you should clean up your mess. And this technology doesn't force you, but invites children and other people to do so. So 3 examples which have nothing to do with robots or artificial intelligence that show you that even normal artifacts are actually an extension of what we, or a certain group, find acceptable behavior and what not. Now, to have a sort of PowerPoint summarization of what we've talked about already, ethics versus technology. Ethics is about what should I do? This is the base question of ethics. We don't have all the same answers, especially not in different cultures, but it is about the same question. What should I do? How should I behave? Technology, as we have seen, influences human behavior. So this is why technology is not neutral and data are not neutral, which we have already seen in the earlier presentations. This doesn't make technology suddenly morally responsible, maybe in the future, but it does make it morally relevant. And that's why engineers should know a lot about ethics also, or should cooperate with ethicists and other scientists, human scientists, in the development of technology. Now, in the examples I just gave, you can see that there's a different degree in which they are influencing human behavior. On the left-hand side, like the trash can in the Efteling, this is an example of nudging technologies. I think you already spoke about it. Nudging technologies is actually that incites the user to do the right thing. It doesn't force you to do so, but it incites you to do so. Now, on the other side, what I would call judging technologies, that's technology that really forces you to do the right behavior. You don't have a choice anymore as a user or as a stakeholder of this technology. Like the electronic gateways or an alcohol lock in a car, you have to be sober before you drive a car. Now, why do I make this distinction? And this is actually the key point of my presentation. The more we go to autonomous technology, and I'm going to use the self-driving car as an example, I only have 12 minutes, but the same accounts for software that decides on loans, autonomous drones that might in the future autonomously drop bombs. The more autonomous technology, the more judging technology. Judging stands for the moral judgment is already made by the designer or the owner of the technology. And that is a difference with autonomous technology versus normal technology or cars. Now, today, it's us drivers who are expected to drive responsibly. In the future, it might be, or it will be, probably the car or the designer of the car. So you've probably already heard about these dilemmas of self-driving cars, and some of them use these dilemmas to say, look how dangerous this technology is. That is not my point. Elon Musk is right, this will save a lot of lives. But this really clearly shows how autonomous technology is about more than math. In this case, an empty self-driving car is threatening to hit two children who suddenly cross the street, which can happen. They will see a lot, they have a very short reaction time, but still there is a braking distance for also self-driving cars, so it might happen. But it can avoid hitting the children by diverting to the other driving lane and then hitting two elderly people. Not unimportant, the children are crossing a red light, the elderly people are crossing a green light. So there are a lot of variables, and you don't get there with mathematics, especially if it's two persons versus two persons. You don't get there. It's also about what is the right decisions. And sometimes the mathematical option is not the right decision. We don't always choose for the least amount of casualties. You would probably not agree with a government that decides to, now and then we're going to sacrifice a healthy person to save many lives with his organs for people who are waiting for organ donation. So just to give an extreme example of the mathematical option is not always the best option. Maybe we should not take into account whether it's children or elderly people, but people who are obeying the law might have a lower priority, not obeying the law, have a lower priority compared to people who are obeying the law. I do not have the perfect solution for this, but this shows how values are at stake in these kind of situations. And it's not just about mathematics. If you go to the website MIT, there you have 20 of those scenarios. The purpose of these dilemmas is actually that you can fill in what you find more responsible and what not. And this might be already a step to sort of participatory system if we eventually have fully self-driving cars. But then we will also need very diverse stakeholders to fill in these kind of dilemmas, that it's not just one Western group, so to say, who decide what is more and less responsible. So if you fill in these dilemmas, then afterwards you get a sort of scorecard. In this case, this person saved doctors mostly, but he mostly killed women. apparently. He took saving more lives mattered more than less lives, and so on. So it's interesting to do so. But again, it shows how there are values embedded in these decisions, and also in the data, because often I get the reaction, yeah, but these systems will learn what is good. But even then, we as designers, or as humans, we should actually say, will need to decide on which data should these systems learn from. So what we will need is values-driven design, which is actually, it relates to what the first speaker said. In my book, sorry, this is in Dutch, but I summarize it in English. I've developed a model that brings together some existing and maybe some new questions and exercises that can help innovators, but also regulators, to reflect on the moral and societal and social impact of technology within the innovation process. Yes, we will need regulation, but I think it is also important that technology designers make the moral reflection themselves. So this is a model that actually wants to ignite or stimulate the moral imagination. It's basically about 3 parts: a stakeholder analysis that brings together, that focuses on who is involved in the technology directly and indirectly. What are the certain impacts or likely impacts? There's a difference between hard and soft impacts. Hard is very direct. Soft is more for instance, a soft impact of the smartphone is that I don't know any phone numbers by heart anymore. That is a soft impact. Is that a bad thing? Maybe not. But it's an indirect consequence of the technology. And then also what I would like to bring into the fore is a value assessment. Look through a value lens at your innovations. To conclude with this example of the self-driving car, it will support values like the mobility of people who are disabled, who are becoming more mobile with self-driving cars if they cannot drive a car right now. The public safety and health, sustainability probably, because they drive more efficiently. But there are also some challenges like the justice and the moral responsibility in case of an accident. And what might also occur, the distrust among pedestrians who are not connected, and they don't know how to interact with these, or how to interpret the behavior of this technology. Today, if you cross a street, not at the traffic lights and maybe not a busy street like this one, but a small street, what do? You make eye contact with the driver. Kind of difficult with a self-driving car. Now, there are 2 ways how to, so let's say, bring ethical values and technology together. Either you surround them with a moral framework or a legal framework. The other way is by design thinking, by adjusting your technology so that certain social or ethical impacts disappear. Now, I don't think this will be possible for the first problem, the justice of decision making. I think we will need the stakeholder inclusive research, as is said there. Transparency, the black box problem is already mentioned. I think this is also an important or an interesting solution, maybe not morally but financially. In the 80s, when big pharma companies designed vaccines, they saved a lot of human lives. But now and then some people reacted badly and died from the vaccines. And then in the US they got huge lawsuits. Now what happened, that these pharma companies said, well, if that is the case, then we don't innovate anymore. We are saving human lives, but for these rare occasions we suddenly get punished. So then the government and the industry had a sort of no-fault compensation system. If there's no individual human mistake, then there is a fund that doesn't bring back people who die, but that comes in between or tries to compensate the loss so that these huge fines can at least not stop the innovation. This might also be a solution to automatic systems that might now and then make a mistake. But the other thing is ethically aligned design. Try to redesign your technology so that certain challenges disappear. And I would like to conclude with an example of human-centered design of the second problem. just an example how you, in your innovation process, can already help or cope with social challenges of your product. So that was it for me. Thank you very much.
I would say like 2 questions because we're already running late. Yeah, the question was much too long. So let's say 2 questions if anybody wants. Yeah.
What do you think of a solution in which you don't let the algorithm per se make the decision, but you rather first ask the so-called driver or the the person that used to be the driver, ask him to do some kind of a driver license test via the MIT test, see what his behavior would be, and let the car react as if that person would be driving himself. Because right now, someone has to, or some government has to choose, make that moral dilemma in which you have to say like, okay, am I going to kill those 2 children or those 2 elder persons or the person in the car? And that's not the solution that fits everybody. Whereas if the computer is doing exactly what you're doing, has the same mindset, would that not be a solution?
It exists. Yeah, the idea exists of a sort of ethical options in your car. Like you have sports option, that you also have ethical options, like selfish or what is the altruistic. Now the problem is, first, it doesn't really disappear because which options can you give to the person? Can everything, imagine the person says, well, when there's a black guy, don't brake, just speed up. Can you give such options? So I'm giving an extreme example, but you still have the problem, what options can the driver take and which can't take? Second is, how do you interact with other cars where there's persons with different moral opinions? So you need to interact, maybe opposing views. And then the last thing is, I sometimes ask, who of you already had a car accident, was involved in a car accident? Okay, who in the car accident you remember now, and if you were driving, who made a very well thought, rational decision in that during the crash? It can happen now and then, but one person. So what I mean is, we don't. It's not that we have very individually very clear answers on what we should do in these situations. This is a dilemma created by the technology, because the technology will see certain, has a lot more data to decide on than we have. So I don't think that will be enough to leave it up to the human, to the individual.
I don't know what you think.
The answer would be, if I were, for instance, a Chinese mafiosi with lots of money, I would hack the autonomous car and make it behave the way that I would behave, that is kill everybody except for myself.
That might happen then.